This is the Ramana Maharshi 40 Verses on Reality Satsang, a time to listen, reflect, and deeply inquire into the self. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I'm a seeker like you, sharing what we love. I've been blessed with years of deep teaching and practice that I bring to this satsang. This week's reading from 40 Verses on Reality is verse 35. These are Ramana's words. To seek and abide in the reality that is always attained is the only attainment. All other attainments, siddhis, are such as are acquired in dreams. Can they appear real to someone who has woken up from sleep? Can they that are established in the reality and are free from Maya be deluded by them? In the analogy of the rope and the snake, what is the significance of all the attainments of the snake? None at all, since the snake never existed to begin with. The only attainment possible is to realize the snake was not real. This is the truth of Ramana Maharshi's teaching, the utter unreality of the ego. All of these apparent attainments are for the ego. The attainment is the self, and it is all, Brahman, the vast absolute. So there is no other. There is nothing to attain, nothing to gain or lose for the self. Even abiding in the self is no attainment, it's the natural state. How can anyone attain what is always there? You don't attain it, you just notice it and realize it. For the ego, though, it can be called the highest attainment. It is where the ego turns back, unable to grasp. Some notes on practice. For me, the key to this is to investigate my sense of being, to look for what is always there. What is always does not need any attainment, it just requires noticing. This is noticing who you are. Once you notice and take this in fully and deeply, then it is being. It is who you are. And the only thing you can do is to be who you are. Now, to our videos for the week. First is Swami Adyasakti, and he is also talking about verse 35.
Namaste, and welcome to the 35th episode of Uladu Narpadu. You know, this book is so foundational. It's so important because it gives the real standard of authentic non-duality, authentic Advaita. Don't fall for this new age, neo-Advaita, confirmed, because it sells you duality as non-duality. And this verse actually points out exactly how that works. The mind having subsided, knowing and being the reality, which is always attained, is the true attainment, siddhi. All other siddhis are merely like powers acquired in a dream. If one wakes up from sleep, will they be real? Will those who have discarded the unreal state of self-forgetfulness by abiding in the real state of self-knowledge be deluded by those unreal siddhis? Therefore know and be as you, the reality, are. So this is the thing. This verse and the next verse talk about phony non-duality versus real non-duality. And this is a theme that comes up again and again in Ulladu Narpadu, because it's a very common error. Merely to think, I am that, is different from actually being that. Huh? If you are actually the self, you're not thinking in terms of attaining anything, because you're already being that. So there's no difference between I and that. I am that. Not that I have to become that, or that I even have to state the relationship that I am that. No, I just am. It doesn't have to be stated or thought. You see, that's the difference between thinking aboutness and being. When someone is thinking about, it's always in terms of words, concepts, some artificial thing, some conceit. Oh, I am that. Well, good for you, buddy. That may be actually the penultimate stage before actual enlightenment, when it's real. When it's an affectation, of course, it's completely bogus. What's the difference? One who really has attained doesn't feel the need to claim it. Doesn't ride on a high horse of I am that, buddy. Huh? You know, just like the other day we were watching a video, Skanda recommended, and we found that here's a guy who is teaching, trying to express the non-dual point of view. And he's being interviewed by this other guy, and the interviewer just doesn't get it. You know, he can't get it. What? You mean there's no objective reality? There's only the self? I don't get it. He admits it. But the guy who's being interviewed, instead of humbly getting down off his high horse and say, well, okay, if you don't get it, then you need to begin at a lower stage, and then questioning him to, you know, having a back and forth dialogue to find out where is he really at? What does he perceive as real? And starting from there. Now, if you read the talks, Ramana always would meet people halfway. If someone could not cognize the highest truth, he was willing to come down to find out what they could understand, and then begin from there to go higher. See, that's a real master. You know, Osho, the reason I broke off with Osho was because I found out he has a very low opinion of Ramana as a master. He doesn't get it. Or he's trying to hide something. I think he was afraid that if people really understood, if his disciples specifically really understood what a great master Ramana is, that they would leave him and go to Ramana like I did. Because Osho, there's one thing about him, he never explains actually how things work. I noticed this very, very clearly when I was working on The Secret of the Golden Flower series. Because in Osho's presentation of The Secret of the Golden Flower, he never really explains what goes on under the hood. He presents it, in a very polished way, a very intellectual way, and it seems like really good, right? But if you actually sit down and try to practice it, it's like, how do you do this? So in my presentation, I tried to give many examples from my own experience. That this is how it came up, this is how it looked to me, and this is how I did it. And actually you can reverse the flow in any of the chakras, not only the Ajna chakra. But of course, reversing the flow in the Ajna chakra leads immediately, almost immediately anyway, to real ecstasy. So that's the normal way to practice it. But anyway, getting back to the subject, that Ramana always goes into the mechanism under the hood, how things really work. And in this verse, he's talking about siddhis. And he's saying the ultimate siddhi of realizing the self is already attained. And he used to tease people who came to him and were being obtuse. He said, do you exist? And of course they say yes. And then he says, so you do recognize that you are the self. Because what else is there really? What else could you be? If you identify as the mind, if you identify as your feelings, if you identify as sensations, or as the body, or as, even worse, your name, your position in some social structure, your function in some business or corporation, or your social standing, like I'm the husband of so-and-so, or I'm the wife of so-and-so. These are all artificial. These are all conceits. And they're causes of suffering because they're temporary. See? So what happens when we think we're something that we're not is that we're inevitably disappointed. And this is why striving for these siddhis, there are ashta siddhis, 8 siddhis, lagima, mahima, prapti, and so on. Becoming greater than the greatest, smaller than the smallest, able to see and hear things far away, able to actually take something from a remote location and bring it like that. And of course, these are great powers that can be used not only for good but for evil. Not only for unselfish purposes, but for very selfish purposes as well. And this is what always happens. People who get siddhis, if they even can get them, because they're very difficult to obtain, but once got, most people will misuse them for their own selfish purposes. And of course, that always leads to fall down. Why? Because doing anything for selfish gain creates karma. And because of the karma, then you have to fall down, take birth again, go through the whole nonsense suffering of childhood and relationships and marriage and children and work and you really want to do that? I don't. I want to get out of here. Let me out of here. So what that means is no more selfish actions. Really, that's the standard of karma yoga. In karma yoga, one does not act anymore for one's own pleasure or one's own benefit, but one's actions are calculated to benefit as many people as possible. Ultimately, the greatest benefit you can do is to realize the self. Why is that? Because every person who becomes enlightened increases the vibration of the whole universe. The whole world, the whole universe becomes a better place with each person who becomes enlightened. So the greatest cause, the greatest mission, the greatest help that one can be to others is to help them realize the self. That's the real siddhi. That's the real power, the greatest mystic power of all. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create conditions where people can actually realize the self. But what we find is most of them, in fact all of them that we have encountered so far, cannot give up selfish action. They cannot give up kamya karma, acting out of self-interest, or to put it plainly, lust. And because of this, they can never really get to bhakti, because their bhakti is always going to be tinged with selfish interest. What can I get out of loving God? Maybe he'll give me some special powers. Yeah. Twirl the mustache. So that's not real bhakti. Real bhakti means I love God just for the beauty of it. Because it's beautiful. That's all. And is more beautiful than any other form of love. Because every other form of love is local or extended selfishness. I love my body. I love my family. I love my country. I love my religion. I love my culture. I love the planet. Whatever. These are all extended selfishness. And of course, I love myself. I love my body. This is local selfishness. This is really, really low. So if you have these aspects in your personality, then you have to find a way to overcome them. And of course, the only way really to overcome them is to practice unselfishness, which means giving. That's why we have always given our materials for free. We have never sold books or videos or CDs or anything like that. That means we are not benefiting from this work. The whole world can benefit from it. But if there's any benefit for us, it's that we get to engage in karma yoga and clear our path for higher stages of self-realization. So this is what everyone should do. These books by Ramana Maharshi are available online for free. Uladu Narpadu, Upadesha Undiyar, and so many others. And we'll be going into them gradually, one by one. So please read them, study them, meditate on them, and realize them. And that will be the greatest benefit for the whole world. Om Tat Sat. Om Harihi Om.
And now we will listen to Nome talk about attainment of the ever-attained.
The self ever is, just as it is. It is only itself, and being never undergoes any kind of modification. It is unborn and indestructible. Consciousness, which is being, does not move. Its nature is never altered. Bliss is of this formless being consciousness. It is ever attained, ever established in its own nature. Inquiry reveals the knowledge of the self as it is. In the course of spiritual practice, generally one of two views is taken up regarding the self and in the attainment of the realization of the self. One view is that of establishing oneself in the self, steadily so. The other view is that of attaining a state in which the self remains steady in oneself, in one's own mind. It is worthwhile to examine your own practice to see if you hold these kinds of views. The former is obviously higher than the latter. If we want the self conceived as an experience or a state to remain steady in our minds, in our experience, we have to ask ourselves, what is this mind in which it would be steady? If the knowledge of the self is to be brought into the life, what is this that is called the life? Whose life? As long as that whose life, whose mind, or the nature of the mind, were left unexamined, how could the desired steadiness, that goal, be reached? The cause of the unsteadiness is not the fleeting nature of the truth or of realization, but the unreal and mirage-like, utterly lacking in solidity nature of the mind, or the one in whom the truth is supposed to abide. If the former view is taken up, there is the idea of establishing oneself in the self. But how is that to be accomplished unless an inquiry be made as to who it is that is to be established? Who is it that now stands distinct, subtly or grossly so, who will become established in the truth? Whether we think the truth should be established in us, whether we should be established in the truth, what is necessary is to know the nature of oneself. Self-realization, therefore, is, we could say, the attainment of the ever-attained, and does not involve establishing the truth in oneself, or oneself in the truth, as well intentioned as these might be, but the realization of one's only identity as that solitary, indivisible existence, which is ever established, the eternal reality. So while we may loosely speak of realizing the truth within, dissolving the mind therein and becoming steady, or abandoning oneself and dissolving into the truth, and thus becoming established in the self. What realization truly is this indivisible abidance in that aspect. No one departs from the reality of the self. No one joins the reality of the self. Therefore, there are neither bound nor liberated jivas or individuals. There is just one self, pure existence, consciousness, bliss. For the realization of this, therefore, the Maharshi has advised to inquire, who am I? And thus know our singular, irrefutable, undeniable, unalterable nature. It is neither here nor there, neither now nor then. It is all that exists, and yet it never becomes an object. It never becomes a subject. It just is as it is. And this is true for all eternity. Therefore, inquire deeply as to the nature of your being or your consciousness. And know it as it is. In this is found the permanence of realization, for that which is unborn is imperishable.
Now let us take a few minutes and meditate, inquire, breathe in and breathe out with long, slow breaths. Feel the breath as it comes in, as it goes out. And now investigate within yourself. What is always? Something within you never changes. What is that? Just notice it. What keeps changing? Can that be who you are? Are you changing? What is the scene? Who is the knower? Who is the seer? Is the knower ever known? Can you see the seer? Who am I? What is the nature of my existence. All right, let's close with a chant. Om Shanti Shanti
Shanti,
Shanti.
Shanti.
Om peace, peace, peace. Thank you for letting me share this teaching with you. This series on Ramana's 40 verses on reality will continue in the following weeks. If this satsang was of interest to you, I have more for you: a Ramana podcast series, a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on screen next. Namaste.